In this video, we want to dive into redraft ranking tiers. If you watched our last wide receiver video, we did a video based off of dynasty rankings. You'll notice in this video that things shift around a little bit, but we also wanted to change it a little bit more. So what we did is we broke out these tiers into ADP. So we looked at consensus ADP and we slotted the top 50 or so receivers into the respective rounds, all the way down into the pretty much the end of round 11, which would be the start of round 12, which is 11 and 12. So our goal here is to obviously show you the ADP of where people are. We did our best to slot them in the direction of from left to right of who is the most valuable to least valuable. That's not always going to be 100% correct as you guys look at this. But what we wanted to touch on in this video is who we actually like versus who we dislike in each of these tiers. For example, in round 1, maybe I really like Tyreek Hill, but I don't like Marvin Harrison Jr. And we'll jump into the rhyme or reason as to why we like or don't like someone in a specific round. This way, you guys can get a little bit of a highlight of what we're looking for. But based off of consensus ADP, the breakdown that you're seeing on this screen right here is where the majority of receivers are going in different rounds. All right, so you'll notice in the first round, jumping into it, rounds 1 to 2 have the most receivers going off the board. And the big reason here that we're seeing this is because in PPR leagues, which is pretty much standard these days, the top tier receivers are going to drive a lot of your fantasy points. So for me, and then I'll turn it over to you, Sam, my number one pick looking at this list is it's going to be CeeDee Lamb. I think he's hands down the best receiver that you can grab in rounds 1 to 2 if you're in a position to grab him. He's most likely going to be the wide receiver 1 or 2 off the board. So if you're not in the top 5 picks, the odds of you getting him kind of drop a little bit. And the receiver that I don't like in rounds 1 or 2 is Marvin Harrison. I'm not a fan of grabbing him that early in a redraft league specifically because I need to see some performance metrics. I know he's touted as someone incredible. I think he's going to have a great career. Heck, I think he's going to have a fantastic year this year, but I want to see something before I put my bet on a rookie. And that's really the leading indicator for me. If this was a dynasty league, like we had in our other dynasty rankings, he is definitely someone that I'd be looking to grab in the first 1 or 2 rounds, 100%.
Yeah, no, for Marvin Harrison to be worth a first-round pick, he has to do better than what Puka did last year, basically, for where he's going in drafts. So I understand kind of waiting on that for maybe take a running back instead or take a more proven asset in the next round. I think for me, because you mentioned CeeDee Lamb, who he's going to go in like the top 3 or 4 picks of almost every single fantasy draft that you do, no matter the format. In terms of value, the guy I like the most here, I think, is Garrett Wilson. I think of any of the guys, and he's like borderline top 10, top 12, so he kind of pushes into that second round depending on the league size and where you're drafting. I think he has a realistic shot this year with Aaron Rodgers just force-feeding him the ball to be a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. He has put up pretty decent numbers with just god-awful QB play. And I think we're going to see a huge uptick. And for his sake, I hope Rodgers stays at least for 2 years so we don't go right back to the garbage QBs that the Jets bring in. But I like Wilson a lot for value. And in terms of someone I don't really love, he's kind of like the trendy pick to hate on right now. But I've disliked him from the beginning. I sold him in some dynasty leagues a few months ago. It's Chris Olave. His situation did not get any better. Yet he's being drafted like Derek Carr was just reborn and is now the next Patrick Mahomes, which I just don't understand. I don't think the Saints are going to be very good. And I don't think, even though Olave is a very talented wide receiver and might have some big boom weeks here and there, I don't think he warrants a top 2-round pick.
That's fair. I would offer a counterpoint on Olave because I picked him up. He had a better season last year than Garrett Wilson did with Derek Carr.
Yeah, no. Well, again, Derek Carr's still there, and I think Aaron Rodgers is obviously a big improvement on Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
I think you're going to get into a consistency level. One thing you guys got to understand in rounds 1 or 2, all of these guys are definitely going to perform for you. There's just certain players you're going to have that are going to be a bit better, and some that you're just going to have to fade a little. So I do agree that Olave would probably be at the bottom of the rounds here in terms of picks. Garrett Wilson is someone that I love too. So I think eyeing him early on and maybe going a little bit of a reach onto Garrett Wilson over some of the other receivers whose ADP might be a little bit higher than him might actually pay off for some of you, because I think there is a logical reason for him to potentially finish wide receiver 1 this year if things go right. He has that upside. All right, in rounds 3 and 4, you'll notice that the pickings start to slim down a little bit as the receivers start to drop off. Rounds 3 to 4 is obviously going to be picks 20 to 40 is where these guys are falling. Who I actually like in rounds 3 to 4, my like is actually Mike Evans. The dude's a stalwart. I don't need to get into the statistics of the facts that like he's had a 1,000-yard season like the last 8 years, and he's one of the few receivers to ever do that. He showed no signs of slowing down last year, and in a redraft league, you can get away with taking him in these rounds, unlike in a dynasty league where you're going to be getting an older player who might not be the big payoff that you're looking for in these rounds. You'd be taking him later. So in between rounds 20 to 30 or 30 to 40, if Mike Evans is on the board, I think he's a steal as a receiver. He's still the clear-cut wide receiver 1 on his team, so I like his upside a lot. As for who I am going to fade on this list, maybe it's a little bit of a grudge. I don't understand why Jalen Waddle's on here. It blows my mind that his ADP is this high. And this isn't a knock on Waddle himself, because I think he is a good receiver, but he's a wide receiver too. And I'm a little bit bitter that Devontae Smith is behind him in the consensus ADPs. And I'm also a little bitter that there are wide receiver 1s like DK Metcalf or Amari Cooper and so on who perform that are going after Jalen Waddle. And you can come talk to me about how the Dolphins offense is this, that, and another thing. I don't care. He showed it last year in a little bit of a fall off in his career, even though he was battling a few injuries, that he is a wide receiver too right now. Tyreek Hill is the receiver that they are going to feed all day long on that team, and plus all the other weapons on the running back side of things that are just going to demand carries. I think taking Waddle in these rounds is a mistake if any of these other people are available.
I know you're not a fan of Waddle. I definitely agree that I'd take guys like Smith and DK and maybe even Neighbors ahead of him. So I would agree I'd maybe pass on Waddle and take someone a little bit later. For Mike Evans, the one thing I'll say, because we've talked about Dave Canales on this channel almost more than any other coach. Yep. Now that Canales is out of Tampa Bay, we saw a regression when Canales left the Seattle Seahawks, and then Geno Smith went from his career year to kind of back to mediocrity. If that happens with Baker, which is a concern I somewhat have here, and Jalen McMillan's going to eat into some of that target volume too, I do worry about him a little bit if that does kind of take place. But if I had to pick the guy that I like the most in this tier, I'm taking Nico Collins every chance I can whenever I'm in these fantasy drafts right now. He had obviously a huge breakout third year last year, but it's not just this jump ball, touchdown guy, even though he's built 6'4", 215. He is very impressive against beating all types of coverages, and he has a very high success rate on his routes that he runs. Mm-hmm. I think that Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell compete more with each other than they compete with Nico Collins. I think Collins' role is actually pretty safe in that offense, and he's going to keep that volume with Stroud. Mm-hmm. With that said, my fade here is Stephon Diggs. I think drafting him was trying to catch a falling knife. I think we saw the drop-off last year when he had Josh Allen, and he was really the only true target in that offense for a while, unless you count James Cook or rookie Kincaid. So I just don't like Diggs at this point in his career. I think he competes a lot with Dell, and Dell obviously has a good connection with Stroud as well.
It's interesting with Diggs. I'm hearing a lot of in some of the fantasy football videos that I watch and I've taken in. A lot of people are thinking he's going to be the wide receiver 1, and that kind of blows my mind. He's had a good camp. He's looked really good. But I just find it hard to believe that he will be taking any type of target share away from someone like Nico Collins or Tank Dell when it comes down to it. But to be candid, I think any one of them are going to be a nice pick when it comes down to it. But if I'm targeting one out of the three, it's going to be Collins. Diggs will be the last one in my book too. All right, in the next rounds, so you'll see we have rounds 5 to 6. This is effectively picks 40 to 60. These are the wide receivers that are going off the board in that range. The one that I love the most out of this list is not one that you guys are probably going to expect, and it's really not. It's maybe I'm a little biased because he's just performed really, really well for me in Dynasty despite anything around him, and that's Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper for me has been such a solid play on my team every year I've had him that it actually kind of blows my mind how he gets faded every single year. And then he comes out and he crushes it as a wide receiver 1 on a team with garbage quarterback play. He's been on so many different teams at this point that it actually kind of blows my mind that he's adventured around so much with as much talent as he has. So I like him. If I can get him at any times in that space in the picks between 40 and 60, I think he's a good grab. What you got to be careful of with his play, though, is like you could probably look at him in the back half of those 20 picks, and he'll probably be there. But I think if you can get him on your team, he's going to give you solid wide receiver 1 upside in these rounds. Whereas if you're looking at the other rounds, you have players like Jalen Waddle. I expect Cooper to outperform, but his ADP is further back. All right? And the person that I would not take in this group for me is going to be Tank Dell. I'm not sold on him. I've said this in other videos. Despite the talent that I've seen, I need to see more. He was obviously hampered by injuries last year. I think there's potential, but it's another player that I need to see more out of before I'm going to be willing to take a pick and use it on him. Same reasoning with Marvin Harrison. So for me, like taking rookies in drafts, it's hard to do in redraft because you can get more of a sure thing and you don't have to prepare for the future. So I'm going to take more of a guarantee and focus on someone like Amari Cooper or Devontae Smith or DK Metcalf where I know what I'm going to get versus something that is a what if. And in this case, Malik Neighbors and Tank Dell are each what ifs.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have the same fade for you in this tier. It's Tank Dell for me too. It's I won't touch on it too much because I talked about it with Diggs. I just think those are the two that they're going to eat into each other. They might both be very good receivers in real life this year, but in terms of fantasy, I'm worried about how they both can produce in that offense. And in terms of the guy that I would take here at like the best value, I'm really torn. I love Smith. I love Neighbors. I like Zay Flowers a lot here too. But I think there's a clear tier drop off after DK Metcalf. I think DK is one of those guys who belongs in like the round 3 to 4 range. He's clearly the alpha wide receiver in Seattle. I think with Grubb there now in Seattle, they're going to air out the ball a lot more. And if you watch college football at all and you're familiar with the Washington offense, which is where Grubb is coming from, DK Metcalf is, I think, most similar build to how Dunze was using that offense last year. Whereas like a Polk or a McMillan would maybe be the JSN or Lockett in that scenario. So I'm really excited. I think he's going to be Geno's number 1 target. I think the Seahawks are going to throw the ball a lot more, and I don't expect them to win a lot of games. So they're going to have to be throwing the ball in the 3rd and 4th quarter most weeks here.
No, that's fair. It makes sense. I like DK a lot too. That's why I got him on my one dynasty team. All right, so moving into the next tier, here's where you start to get a little bit picky. All right, so we're looking around 7, 8. We're looking at picks pretty much 60 to 80 at this point. So what that means is looking at everyone in this list, for me, I'm going to start taking volume heavily into an account when I expect who I'm looking to grab. And the person that stands out to me here, who's probably going to get the most volume out of everybody in this tier, is Terry McLaurin. He's the only wide receiver that Jaden Daniels has now that they traded away Jahan Dotson. Granted, I know there was expectation that he might have been cut or whatever. There is no one else that is up to Scary Terry's level. So for me, grabbing someone that is a wide receiver 1 that is going to command volume with what appears to finally have a decent quarterback, I'm going to go ahead and take that chance and grab him in redraft league. Who am I fading in this list? For me, there's just one person that I just don't like to stand out and like really not too much because I feel a little bad. But it's T. Higgins. I'm fading T this year. I'm not on board with how this offseason has been. I'm concerned about how in he is for the Bengals. You could tell that he just really wanted out with the franchise tag and everything. He was just not having any of it, but he's kind of stuck in his current situation. So I think you're going to see a bit of a disgruntled play from him. He didn't look as good last year. I know Burrow missed time that he did the previous year. So for me, it's just a reason for me to avoid him because anytime a player is potentially on the cancerous side of things where they're going to cause problems or I see a bit of a fall off, there's no reason to take that jump or risk and go for them.
Yeah, no, I agree. This whole tier, I'm kind of like in the actual drafts I'm doing, I'm basically fading this whole tier on wide receivers.
Yeah,
I'm mostly trying to take running backs at this point, or if I miss out on a top tight end, taking like a Ferguson or Ingram here too. With that said, there is one guy in this tier that I do like, and he's at the end of it. I do like Xavier Worthy. If Hollywood Brown wasn't injured, I probably wouldn't have this take. But I think the fact that Hollywood Brown's going to miss the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season, Rice isn't suspended as of right now, but things can change fast in that development there. And we know what Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes can do when they have like a speedy wideout like a Deshaun Jackson or Tyreek Hill. I know Worthy has a long way to go before he can become that. But just the boom or bust potential for him as like your fourth wide receiver, third wide receiver at this point, he could win you game weeks by himself in that flex spot. He also could lose you them if he doesn't get that 60, 70-yard touchdown. But I think if anyone has like league winning potential this late in this tier, I like Worthy the best.
Fits. All right. We're getting deep, obviously, at this point. And for me, I'm sticking with the same person I've talked about in just about every single video, and that's Diontae Johnson. In this next tier, he is clear cut to me, the person you should be taking in these rounds. I think he is being faded way too much in way too many drafts, especially in the ADP, and the people that decide not to pick him up are going to be regretting it. And if he is there in these rounds, you'd be a fool not to take him. He is the only wide receiver one on that list, still available at this time, and he's going to get fed by Bryce Young. Speaking of Dave Canales, he's going to get fed. All right, you'd be a fool not to grab him at this stage. If he's there, go and grab him. As far as someone that I am just trying to avoid, it's going to be Hopkins. He's just not in a good situation. I don't necessarily want to say that he's at that cliff that we may see in wide receivers as they get older. I just don't like his QB room. I don't like what's around him. I don't think he's going to have the opportunity to really succeed as if he were on a team with better quarterback play.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's kind of scary at that age. He's already starting off the season hurt. I think Ridley is going to be that number one guy in Tennessee there too. So at the beginning of the tier, that's Calvin Ridley at the beginning, right? That's not Brian Thomas. My eyes are failing me at this stage. So the guy I like the most in this tier is Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to be the wide receiver one in Tennessee. He's already shown a pretty good connection with Will Levis, in preseason action here and in training camp. He's 29 going on 30, but as we mentioned with Ridley before, he missed those 2 full years, not due to injury. So I don't think he has the wear and tear of other older receivers. I think he could have a big bounce back. He saw a ton of volume last year, but it was bad volume. It was like 120 targets and 75 catches because they were just sending him up the sideline and praying that he scored a touchdown basically. I think he might be used better this year, and I'll take him at that stage. And in terms of a fade, I am never touching Hollywood Brown. The injury killed him. I think that Xavier Worthy's going to run away with that job now that there's that opening. And I think Hollywood Brown is just going to be a gadget player for the Chiefs when he comes back.
All right. I like Hollywood Brown, as you know. I think he's got pretty good upside this year, but the injury obviously does knock him back a peg. So who knows how he'll look when he comes back. All right, these last 2 rounds that we have locked in here, obviously the pick can start to get a little bit small. The person I am honestly the most bullish out of this list is Jameson Williams. It sounds silly because of what we've seen of his career so far, which has been a bit of a joke, if I'm being honest, between not being able to play because of injuries first year and then missing a chunk of games because you gambled like an idiot. It's kind of comical, but there's a reason this guy was drafted where he was, and that's because he's a talented wide receiver. With him being the clear-cut wide receiver 2 on Detroit this season, I think he's going to get a lot of opportunity. His volume is going to go up, and we're finally going to get to see what he is actually capable of on the field. Or just be completely wrong and he's going to bust. The other side, who I'm avoiding in this list. So, for me, it's the Packers wide receiver, Christian Watson. I don't think I am 100% on any of the receivers in Green Bay. The one I like the most is Jaden Reed. I think he has the most upside out of everyone there. But otherwise, I think you're just looking at a bunch of like wide receiver 2s, like just every single between Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks. Maybe he's more of a wide receiver 3, but I know he's a sleeper candidate for a lot of people. All 3 of the ones I mentioned, Reed, Watson, and Doubs, they're all who would be a wide receiver 2 on any other team right now. Jaden Reed maybe has some upside to be a wide receiver 1 at some point. He looked really good in his rookie season. We could see more of that this year, but that hasn't happened yet. So for me, I'm going to stay away from any of them for the time being, and that is not a knock on Jordan Love because I think Jordan Love is going to have a monster year, and he's going to feed his wide receivers candidly, but I don't know who's going to get the most volume on that team, so I become a little bit iffy on who I'm going to pick.
Yeah, and again, it's just the uncertainty. There's 4 guys in there that could all very well be that number 1 or number 2 option. So I think we're just going to see that volume kind of spread out amongst all 4 of them. Watson's my fade on this list too, so I won't drag that out too long, but I agree with you there. Okay. I think my number 1 guy in this tier, I'm tempted to say JSN, but he's not the number 1. The guy I'm going to go with here is Cortland Sutton. Bo Nix has looked 10 times better than I ever could have imagined he would at this stage in his career. He does really fit the Sean Payton mold of what he was looking for, of quick checkdowns, quick passes, get the ball out accurately and quickly. And there's already rumors that Denver's shopping Tim Patrick. It's clear that Payton isn't sold on Marvin Mims as a wide receiver 1 in that offense. He's been running with the 3s and 4s mostly in preseason. Yep. I don't think Josh Reynolds is even close to Cortland Sutton. I just think he's going to command like a 30-35% target volume in that offense. And I think Nix is a lot better than people maybe are expecting right now. And Sutton's going to be the biggest beneficiary of that.
Yeah, he would. He's a potential wide receiver 1 at the rounds 11 and 12. You can't really go wrong on taking a chance on something like that when it comes down to it. All right, so with that said, that's our rundown of the top receivers. Obviously, not all the receivers are on this list. We understand that. We're only going into the top 120 picks here. Some drafts might go to 200. Most redraft leagues are going to 160. But after you fall off this, there's just a cliff that you kind of jump off of before you start seeing value. And you're really starting to take chances at sleepers and things like that, at people that can potentially break out. But in a redraft league, you definitely want more of a sure thing because you just don't have that stash space that you may see in a dynasty league where you can kind of stash some of these players away and hold on to them to see if they break out in a year or 2. So with that said, that's our rundown. We would definitely love to hear your thoughts. Please leave them down below in the comments. And as always, we appreciate any subscribers or likes to this video that you can provide us. It helps us make this content, it helps us continue to do this, and it's also really one of the more fun things when it comes to these videos.